in the
knock-on
end.
effects, and that's what Musk said. If you bankrupt the big three,
Then nobody's
as it's
got a
happened to
job.
2 out of the big three in the past, then BYD will come in with its cars. Tesla will be making a $25,000
I just don't think we can look away
car.
and not confront the real issues, Walter, because we could stop it from happening. If
Things get a little heated in the studio today. Walter Isaacson rolls up and starts telling everybody what's going to happen. BYD is going to move in with their cheap labor, and Tesla is making their $25,000 car. But this pulls on the heartstrings of the reporters. Let's watch.
President Biden rallied the UAW workers in Michigan. This happened on Tuesday as the strike moves into its 13th day today. And now Tesla CEO Elon Musk weighing in on what's taking place in Detroit, criticizing workers' demands as a, quote, sure way to drive GM, Ford, and Chrysler bankrupt in the fast lane. For a closer look at that fast lane, let's bring in Walter Isaacson. He's always in the fast lane. Nice to see you, sir.
Good to see you again.
Let's talk about this. Do you believe, or I guess what do you believe, A, is the right answer for the UAW and the automakers, and do you think Elon's right?
I think this is not just about the wages right now. It's about the fast move we're doing to electrification, EVs. And that changes everything. If you're building an EV, it's at least 30% and will soon be 50% less time on the assembly line, less work to be done. Likewise, the batteries aren't unionized. So as you make this transition to electric vehicles, it's very disruptive. For Musk, he's trying to bring out a $25,000 global car, compete with BYD. He's going to do it both in northern Mexico, but in Austin, this new line. And I think if the legacy automakers don't figure out how to make this transition, that's what the strike's about, is figuring that out.
Walter's right. If the big three didn't have to transition to EVs, they could just sit and coast off the sales of their ICE vehicles and pay the union what they want, and they would chug along. But the government is saying, no, everybody needs to make this transition. So here's $12 billion. Now go and retool your factories for automation so that you guys can make EVs. That's why if I was a big three CEO right now, and thank goodness I'm not, I would give in to the 4-day work week request by the union because automation requires less labor. Because the union knows that the requests for a wage increase is going to bankrupt the big three. So if you're the union, you're either hoping for one last hit of the cigar, or you're hoping that the big three goes bankrupt and the government bails them out with taxpayer money and you keep your job. But now Ford is pausing construction of their $3.5 billion EV battery plant in Michigan. So the EV transition doesn't seem to be going very well. It's actually very grim. So this is why Walter is going to start suggesting alternatives, as we're about to see. But host Joe Kernan doesn't want to let those union jobs go.
So when you see President Biden standing with the UAW workers, do you say that's right, that's wrong, given where we are? I mean, I think there's two issues here. We're at a time where he's pushing EVs, which makes this all that more difficult. At the same time that he's saying we want to be a country where everything is manufactured here. BYD, what do they pay, $7 an hour?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and the UAW is now, what, $65 an hour or so, $110,000 a year, which would go way up on the strike. And this is a complex thing that you all debate all the time here. But if you can do $7 an hour in China and $65, $70 here, that's going to be a problem. Likewise, automation is going to be a problem. Likewise, electrification is being a problem. So in some ways, it's a bit like, you know, King Canute railing against the tides. You got to figure out where the tides are going to hit.
How can you compete as an automaker when your wages are 10 times what they are in China? And look, the last thing I want to see in America is a bunch of BYD vehicles driving around. Trust me. Adam Jonas released a note this morning that helps us understand how lethal these wage increases are going to be for the big three. He writes, from our prior work, we estimate UAW linked all-in labor costs account for roughly 4% of global sales for big three players, closer to 5 or 6% of North America sales. Considering increased total labor costs embedded in the supply chain, it may be slightly more than double this amount. We estimate Tesla's labor cost as a percent of revenues, which may appear similar to that of a traditional manufacturer, but investors should consider the extraordinarily high level of vertical integration in factory and downstream infrastructure and 30% type top-line growth automation that should reduce the labor ratio over time. In our view, even if the big three had parity with Tesla on labor cost, we don't see a path to profitability at scale in EVs without unusual levels of taxpayer support or other significant strategic changes. Not only will the wages for big three laborers be way higher than Tesla's, but the big three also uses way more laborers per vehicle produced than Tesla. I mean, the loop has to end at some point. These companies keep going bankrupt and taxpayers keep bailing them out. That cycle needs to stop. The US debt is now $33 trillion. Walter Isaacson's going to say we need to start looking at alternatives. Let's keep watching.
And then how concerned do you think, and maybe this is true of Tesla or Rivian or some of the other automakers, there is a knock-on effect, which is to say that even though those are companies that don't have unions, that if, in fact, these unions capture much higher prices, it does press the price higher everywhere else.
Oh, absolutely. A Tesla worker may make $45 an hour, but they get stock options. And that's confusing if the stock's at, 100, then 400, then 250.
And there was a period of time where clearly Tesla workers, even though they weren't unionized, were getting paid much more, frankly, than the unionized workers were at GM. Having said that, there's a period of time where the stock was at a different place where it is today.
Yeah, I think there was a period of time where a worker at a Tesla plant was making more than you because the stock was
No,
not more than Jeff.
Yeah, more than me.
But
America actually does need more stock-based compensation. It incentivizes the workers to do well because when the company does well, the workers make more money. If Tesla ends up making $1 trillion a year in profit, as Elon projects, then Tesla's valuation could be as much as $20 trillion, and the factory workers who were working on the floor doing repetitive tasks that a lot of people could do are going to be rich. You don't get that kind of opportunity at Ford or GM. At Ford or GM, you show up, you do your job, you collect your $65 or $70 an hour, and you go home. It doesn't matter if you perform well that day. It doesn't matter if you made the assembly line go faster because you thought of a good idea. It doesn't matter. So as a worker, why bother keeping your eye out for efficiencies and innovations? If you see one and you're like, hey, that part shouldn't be there, let's delete it. Someone's going to be like, no, that's somebody's job.
That's a complicated thing. Do you want stock options? And Musk got in trouble at one point when they're trying to unionize a plant, and the Fremont plant. He said, but you might lose your stock options, and that was considered an unfair labor practice. I think that your initial question is, yes, it's going to put pressure on Tesla, Rivian, and everybody else. If there's a significant wage increase for the UAW workers, then there's going to have to be that for the Tesla workers, even if they're getting stock options.
Could they ever unionize those plants, too? I mean, that's
well, there was a big drive to
unionize.
No, I don't think any electric vehicle maker plants are unionized. I know no Tesla plants are. There was a big push to do it in California, and it failed on this vote. But there will be another push. I am absolutely sure that the UAW at some point will be trying to unionize electric.
So yeah, the UAW will push on the Fremont factory again for sure, but the stock is up 100% so far this year, so the workers there might be content for the time being. But if the union workers get a raise at the big three and they're making like $150,000 a year, that might be enticing for the Fremont workers. But let's say that Fremont factory does unionize. Well, for Tesla, I think Fremont would just become a smaller and smaller part of their business. Once Tesla gets to 20 million vehicles a year, Fremont's only going to account for 650,000 of those. And Fremont's factory is the least efficient of all of Tesla's factories because Tesla didn't build it. They did not design it. They purchased it from Toyota. So if they did decide to unionize, they would also be at the risk of getting faded by Tesla, becoming less and less important and getting less and less investments in that factory. On top of all of that, those factory workers would no longer be getting the stock-based compensation and they would miss out on Tesla's potential huge gains. As far as unionizing at the Austin Gigafactory goes, that is much less likely because in the state of Texas, about 4.1% of the wage and salary in the state are attributed to union workers, whereas that number is actually 16% in California. So Fremont is 4 times as likely to unionize as the Texas plant. So I'm not that worried about the Texas plant right now just because of the political ideologies in that state.
But batteries, by the way, are not included generally in the UAW contract.
That's a big sticking point
and
right now.
And there's no
Ford's
engine to build in a electric vehicle.
Ford infuriated the UAW yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, when they said that new plant with China, they were just going to not build it, the plant there, because of these very issues. They were on the right. There are people. It's a project with China, so the China hawks are mad about it. The union is mad about it if it's not going to be unionized.
And by the way, the automakers are getting left behind. Like 90% of these new vehicle EVs are Tesla. Tesla sold more than 1 million, I think, in the first 6 or 7 months of this year. So it's leaving the older automakers behind. And with Ford once again saying, we're not sure we're in this business, we're not sure we're building batteries, this is a larger mess that surrounds the UAW.
And here's a visualization for you guys of EV sales in the first half of 2023. As you can see, Tesla is 10 times the number 2 spot, which is Chevy or GM. Number 3 is Ford. So the number 2 and 3 spots are both on strike. Tesla's market share is expanding. I thought the competition was coming.
I understand there's an election coming up, and you'd like the working class, and Trump was going to go there anyway. Probably I understand that, and I understand student loan forgiveness. It all, there's things that you do. But one thing that I've always complained about with public unions, when a Democratic governor says we're going to get you a great contract, the governor is there to protect the taxpayers' interests and not to let the state get overwhelmed by pension costs, and not to promise the moon to the public employees that he's bargaining with. And then they usually contribute, the unions, to getting the same guy or gal reelected again. This is similar to me. If Biden is there saying, or President Biden is there saying, you need to get this deal, you need $40. If he bankrupts the big 3, taxpayers are once again going to be bailing them out.
It's corrupt. Biden is going to the big 3 and saying you need to pay the union what they want. Then the union gives Biden their vote. Then the big 3 goes bankrupt, and then Biden gets the taxpayers to bail them out. But the taxpayers are the people that Biden is supposed to be acting in the interest of. We just keep going through this cycle, and America is supposed to be this place of entrepreneurship and capitalism, but these unions are just these pernicious little entities that choke out any incentivization or motivation to innovate at companies, and it's sad, and Biden's advocating for these groups.
Well, this was Musk's point, which is you'll bankrupt the big 3. Now,
with the help of the guy who's supposed to be protecting the taxpayers
I'm not
I know you never do, but
with you in arguing this, but it is true that union workers and the workers are not keeping pace with the profits being made.
I understand
so
but should the president be there arguing on the side of the workers when he's representing everybody? He's representing corporate interests. He's representing.
You're out of my field of expertise.
Oh, you always punt when you could say something that's right in front of your face.
Biden is fighting for the people on the assembly line whose wages haven't caught up,
who could end up losing their job because they bankrupt the companies.
And there are knock-on effects, and that's what Musk said. If you bankrupt the big 3, as it happened to 2 out of the big 3 in the past, then BYD will come in with its cars. Tesla will be making a $25,000 car.
I just don't think we can look away and not confront the real issues, Walter, because we could stop it from happening if we could actually do some good.
I appreciate Joe for wanting to talk about it so that unions can keep their jobs and taxpayers don't have to pay more money and everybody can come out of this huge mess just so happy. But Walter is keeping it real. He's bringing up the $25,000 car. He's bringing up cheaper labor options in China like BYD because he knows those are the only real alternatives to this huge mess. And it's a really hard problem. I mean, if the big 3 goes bankrupt, then all of their suppliers go bankrupt, and then all of the other auto companies operating in the US go bankrupt. We go into a recession, and the world's not ready to transition to EVs because there's not enough supply yet, and People aren't going to be able to buy new vehicles for their business to operate, and we just go into a hard recession. So yes, Joe Kernan is upset about this corrupt cycle, and he's bringing it up, but there's nothing he can do to stop it because Biden is just going to do it again because he doesn't want America to go into a recession on his own watch. So let's end with some considerations on how the big three might move forward out of this mess with Adam Jonas. He says, the UAW strike may last a long time, or it could be resolved any day, we don't know. In any case, each of the big three must decide what size and character of auto company it wants to be. Do they really want to be the next Tesla? Is that a realistic goal? Do they want to focus on ICE and $150,000 niche EVs? Can they provide a reasonable on-ramp to their Chinese partners into Western markets? We see scope for the UAW standoff to bring to light more consequential issues facing the future of auto manufacturing in the US and the role of today's players. Legacy doesn't have to be history. Even Wall Street is starting to acknowledge that the competition is not coming. The question is now, how will the competition survive? Let me know if you have any ideas in the comments how the big three survive. Good day, everyone.